Hello and welcome to another episode of Naturally Adventurous. I'm Charlie Hesse and I'm joined as ever by my good friend Ken Behrens. So I think we're going to get back into it. This week we're going to get back to Ken's top 10 Lifetime Mammals, and I believe we're now at number 4, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And this is a pretty special animal. I know it's got special significance in your life. It took you many years to find. I was lucky enough to see it quite early in my days in Africa, but that's the way that the cookie crumbles. So yeah, I'd love to hear your take on the African wild dog.
Yeah, it's funny. There's animals like I saw cheetah within about 10 days of moving to Africa, and then that's something that can be
Really?
quite a hard animal to encounter.
That took me a while. That was probably maybe 3 years or so before I saw my first cheetah in Africa. Yeah.
But yeah, my experience with wild dog was quite the opposite. So I've always just loved canids. My first big natural history love was snakes when I was I don't know, 5, 6, 7, and then the next thing I moved on to was wolves and coyotes. My family was always going out to Yellowstone because I was born in Idaho, and there was coyotes all over the place, and I just loved them. Just thought they were awesome. So this was even before I got into birds. It was snakes, and then it was canids. So I've just always had a soft spot for dogs, maybe like you did with rhinos. Just gripped
maybe
by canids. So certainly when I moved to Africa, that was something I was very keen to see was African wild dog. And my first few years in Africa, I wasn't too worried about not seeing wild dog.
It'll happen.
It'll happen. Just patience. Don't worry about it. There's going to be an encounter one of these years. And now at the same time, I was putting myself in position to see wild dog. During the World Cup, my brothers visited, and we went to Kruger for like 10 days, and I spent several days in the best areas of the park for wild dog, hoping I might have this fortuitous encounter with them. Nothing. No dogs.
So there's a wonderful little system they've got in Kruger, because a lot of people go there independently. They just sort of drive around, but in each camp they've got a little map by the office. And they've got these little coloured magnets, one colour for each of several top animals. So I can't remember the colours. I think leopard was black, and maybe lion was red, and I think and then there was a colour for cheetah. There was a colour for wild dog. So whenever you get into a camp, and there's a whole bunch of these camps throughout Kruger, you can go and check out these little maps, and then you've got your own little map, and then you sort of say, okay, wild dogs were seen here today at this point. Okay, that's nearby. Let's go and check it out. And because sometimes animals would they make a kill and they'd hang around there for a day or a few hours or whatever. So you would always shoot off and be able to sort of target your searches for different things. But to no avail, obviously.
So I found those maps so infuriating. As I recall, the color for wild dog is white, and every time I got into one of these Kruger camps on trip after trip after trip, I get in and I look at this bloody map, and it's absolutely spattered with wild dog sightings.
Really?
People have seen dogs everywhere. All the places I've just driven, dogs. I don't know if sometimes if kids might maybe just put these things randomly.
They do.
There,
I've seen that. I've seen
kids
just sort of playing with a magnet, sort of moving them around a bit. But
so it was pretty insulting, pretty frustrating. Again, just trying not to pressure. Okay, it'll happen. Well, some kind of psychological barrier was crossed when I realized I had spent 10 years in Africa and I still hadn't seen a wild dog. I did tours where I guided people in South Africa, and then I dropped them off at a private game reserve, and they saw wild dogs. I guided people who'd done Kruger on their own, and they saw wild dogs. It was these people who are on their first ever African trip, I'm like dropping them off, and they're seeing dogs within 3 days. And this was
some people with young children. They would see so my son, I think it was maybe a year before you. He did a Namibia trip, and they saw wild dogs. So for a year, he was really he was always asking me, "So has Ken seen wild dog?" And I'm like, "Nope, Ken hasn't seen wild dog."
The Namibia is another place. I did trip after trip. I've probably done at least a dozen trips in Namibia, and just always dreaming of seeing wild dogs. People would tell me, "Oh yeah, we saw them here near this gate in Etosha." No wild dogs. And then a bunch of times we did these trips where we ended in Maun, Botswana, and then we drove. I did some of these on my own, some of these with you, but we drove back sort of 15, 16 hours back to Windhoek, and you drive
through the heartland of the stronghold of wild dogs.
Absolutely. So you're driving through the heart of the Kalahari, the heart of the range of wild dogs. It's just this unfenced wilderness that just goes on for hundreds and hundreds of miles. And every time I drove that, I was just thinking, it's going to happen this time. There's just a pack of wild dogs is going to run across the road in front of me. And nope, did not happen. So when I hit this 10 years in Africa, it was really starting to bother me. It was like, there's a place, there's a private reserve where you can go where they have radio tracked wild dogs. And I was just about to break down and go there and just say, okay, it was a little bit like you with the eye. It was like, okay,
take me to the dog.
Scruples are gone. I just want to see a bloody dog. But fortune finally stepped in, and I was guiding a northern Tanzania trip. This was a set departure trip. This is my favorite trip to guide in the whole world. I absolutely love that trip. And this was even before I saw wild dogs. But so we're driving along one day, and I was co-guiding this trip with Ian, one of the owners of Tropical Birding. And so he was in the other vehicle, and I suddenly got this frantic call on the radio. There's dogs, wild dogs. And I just like screamed, "Turn around!" And so we did this like the fastest U you can imagine in this big safari vehicle. It's not a very tight U, but
tires.
I mean, we turned around and I shouted to everybody. I said, "Just everybody sit down and hold on." And we just roared back. So we were sort of 3 or 4 kilometers away from the other vehicle. They sort of lingered behind us,
really?
Which that's a long ways when you're talking about a fleeting wildlife sighting, potentially.
Would seem like an eternity.
An absolute eternity. So we roared back, and we got to the other car, and they're all kind of sitting there, a little bit crestfallen, like they'd glimpsed this thing, and not even everybody in the car had seen it, and then it had disappeared. And they also knew. So Ian knew that I had never seen wild dog, and this was just this 10-year jinx mammal. As you know me, Charlie, I'm not one to be easily gripped off, and I'm usually like pretty philosophical about missing things, and this would have been a devastating miss, like so much worse than just all the little white circles on the board at Kruger.
Yeah.
But so I pieced together. Okay, I asked people, okay, where did you see it? Where was it headed? And what I realized, there's a crossroad that goes down that way. So, we go back and we hit a T and we can go left. And if the dogs have continued that way, then we might cross their path. So I was like, go, 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 go. So we shot off, we got to the T, and we're basically sitting there next to a river. And so we're sort of watching the road, and these animals theoretically can't get past us without crossing this road. And sure enough, it worked perfectly. Up trotted a whole pack of wild dogs, just as I'd hoped. Ooh. Fantastic, just so satisfying. I found them surprisingly huge. First, I thought of them as sort of coyote-sized, but man, they're big. They're almost hyena-sized. Tall, really, tall. Not huge bodies, but such long legs, and then big, powerful jaws. Beautiful splotchy markings and multiple colors. So
variable as well, eh?
Super variable, and huge ears, absolutely huge ears. Just very, very kind of funny, goofy looking in a way. But man, it was a real special moment to finally see those dogs. Everybody on the trip knew I'd never seen them before. And I mean, everybody in the tropical birding knew this was like a huge nemesis for me, and so it was like
Yeah,
it was big news when I finally saw this animal.
I think Ian had already seen them. I think he saw them in Kruger, and he hardly goes to Kruger, and he went like once and found a whole bunch of them sat under a tree somewhere. I remember that a few years ago.
I'm sure everybody saw wild dogs before I did. Everybody.
Yeah. So can I quickly tell you my sighting? It was not quite as dramatic as yours, but yeah, it was on one of my first trips. It was I'd maybe been in South Africa a year or something like that, and I had a group of Japanese clients, and we were in a vehicle and we were going along. And there's another thing in Kruger. So you've got your little maps with coloured magnets, and there's another thing which is you get these like groups of cars. You'll kind of drive along a road and you'll see like there's about 10 cars there, and I started realizing that you can kind of tell what it's going to be based on how many cars there are.
Yep.
Yeah, and sometimes you might have 5 cars or whatever. It might be some elephants, or 10 cars, or it might be a lion, or 20 cars. It might be a leopard. I was driving along this road, and I don't know how many cars there were. It was a slow moving convoy, and I think it must have gone around a bend, and I could actually see this convoy of cars, and it just went on and on and on, and I couldn't believe it. And I got to the front car because I was going in the other direction, and I sort of stopped, and I was like, "What is it?" And they were like, "Wild dogs," and these wild dogs were walking parallel to the road and in the same direction as this convoy. So the front vehicle was level with the dogs, yeah. And he pointed them out, and I was like, "Oh my god!" We had a quick look, and then we start reversing. So we're going at the same speed as the front vehicle going the other direction. So now not only you've got a huge convoy in one lane, you've got a reverse convoy in the other lane, or going backwards. and then people, I would see a car behind, and then I'd sort of slow down a little bit, and they would see the dogs, and they would sort of start reversing as well. So we had seriously, I mean, there was like 30 or 40 cars in this convoy coming one way, and in the end we probably had about 10 or 15 cars all reversing in the opposite direction like that. But we had the sort of prime location because we were level with the lead car and the other one, so we were getting really, really good views. But they were just moving. They were moving the whole time. So I don't think I got any photos or anything, but it was quite a funny sighting.
Just to tell people a little bit more about wild dogs, it's one of these animals, a bit like the rhinos. They used to be common. They used to be all over the whole continent in all kinds of different habitats, and their range has shrunk way down to a few strongholds and a few little outlier populations, like in North Africa. I think the population's down to around 1,400 individuals, which is pretty terrifying. It's an endangered species.
It's just a rapid decline as well. I remember in Kruger, I remember at one point there was 450, and next time I heard there was like 200. They'd like halved in just a few years.
I think they're quite subject to some canine diseases, and they might get passed from semi-wild dogs, and it's one of these animals so they're pack hunters. Very, very social, and they hunt as a group, and I think they have the highest kill rate of any of the predators in Africa.
Really?
They can chase things for miles and miles and just wear them down.
Yep.
So once a pack of dogs starts chasing an antelope or something, they usually get it, which is not the case with lions or even leopards. They have like a 1 in 3 shot or something, and that's even they're usually getting within a few meters of something, and they still often get away. But dogs, I think it's around 80% kill rate. So they're pretty remarkably efficient predators, but they just need big open areas, just large undisturbed land, and I think they're often poisoned or shot by farmers as well, because they naturally will take livestock.
I think they can. I think you get this thing where carnivores just absolutely hate each other. They'll if you get a lion and a leopard, or a lion and a wild, they'll without even hesitating, they'll kill the cubs or
Yep.
or whatever. So I know in places with high lion densities, they really suffer. Often their cubs get killed by lions or leopards, hyenas. Yeah,
Probably
so
hyenas.
it's a tough life.
And that sort of pressure, I'm sure, is exacerbated by shrinking range, and these predators are probably more pushed together in some of the same reserves, and it changes the dynamic.
I know in a lot of I remember in Mkuzi there was poachers used to come in and they would set snares for anything. They might get an antelope or whatever, but the wild dogs would often get caught in snares. And there were so many snares put in Mkuzi Game Reserve near where I used to live, that I think there was 2 packs of wild dogs, and they were radio collared, and they would try and get a visual on each individual every day just to make sure it wasn't caught in a snare somewhere.
Wow.
So it was pretty sort of labor-intensive conservation.
Beautiful dogs. I still need to see the Southern African ones, which that population is, I think, even more attractive than the East African
Really?
ones. Yeah, they're quite pretty.
The one thing with them, I think that one of these ones where there's sort of alpha males and females, and they're the sort of only ones to actually breed, and all the other members of the pack, they sort of help rear those pups. I know they can have very big litters.
Yeah, that's right.
Of pups, and although sometimes they can bounce back very quickly. I remember there was just down to a few individuals in Mkuzi, and that 2 years later there was loads of them, and they were having to catch them and dart them and send them off to other reserves and stuff like that. So they are able to make quite quick comebacks.
It's tricky. It must be tricky to manage an animal like that has these boom and bust cycles in these smaller fenced reserves. When you just had the whole continent, they just sort of disperse, but it gets a lot trickier when you've got these little reserves.
Cool. Shall we move on to your next
Yep.
mammal? Yep. Cool. So we're down to your number 3, I think now, which is puma, or mountain lion, or cougar, or any one of those names.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other South American names. Puma's a common one, right? Throughout.
I think the official name is puma, and I think that actually comes from Quechua. I think that's a name from South America.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, another a big cat. I guess it's quite a special one in North America, as sort of the only really big predator left in a lot of North America. So it has this kind of almost spiritual attraction to it. I've always found that people are quite romantic about big predators, especially in places where they're almost gone or completely gone. There's some part of us that it's just like wired to be in a place that has animals wandering around that can kill us. So I hear a lot of talk in the States about mountain lions, and they're not seen all that often. It's one of these animals where people who've spent their whole lives in the wilderness might not have seen them, or only seen them a couple times.
I think even I mean a lot of big predators are very elusive, whatever. But I think really, even in terms of big predators, they're like one of the most elusive cats to see, aren't they?
Yep, which I guess is why they've survived in areas with pretty high human density as well. They manage to just keep out of their way. It has an incredibly huge range too, right? It's basically
all the way down to Tierra del Fuego in the south. Yeah,
so
the
sort
whole
of Canada, I guess,
of South America.
Some of the boreal forest, all the way down to Tierra del Fuego. It's crazy, unbelievably adaptable animal, but still hard to see. I mean, most people who have seen puma have seen it in Argentina, right?
It's actually Chile.
Oh, Chile. Okay, what is it called?
Torres there's a national park. It's called Torres del Paine.
Okay.
It's because the Paine is actually comes from Paine. Like I think it was an Irish person. There was a few sort of Irish settlers, and they named this place after Mr. Paine. But of course, being Spanish, they call it Paine. So and they had these like tower-like mountains. It's stunning scenery. These big pinnacles, and they're the towers, the Paines Towers, but they call it Torres del Paine.
Okay.
I've never actually been there, but I'm dead. When I not if I when I go and look for this animal, that's where I'm going to be going. So I think hopefully at some point I'll do a little hiking trip there and see if I can go and find them. That's where Keith saw his there.
That seems to be the place. Like if you want to go somewhere and spend a week and have a very good chance of seeing a mountain lion, that's the place. But despite the fact that it's found almost everywhere in the Western Hemisphere, there's one park where it can be sort of reliably seen. And I don't know why. I guess it's quite open and...
It's open, yeah.
And there must be a reasonably high prey density, and there must be some factors there. But I don't know. I mean, it's a lot of the Western United States is quite open, but you just don't see mountain lions regularly.
No.
It's just incredibly elusive. I suspect the populations in the Western United States have been selected for individuals that are really wary, because the bold ones didn't survive. But so I
always remember I went hiking on Vancouver Island, and you always hear that it's got like the highest puma density in the world, and there's a park that I went there, Gulfstream Park, and they say it's one of the highest densities, and you'll go out hiking and you won't see a puma, but most likely one will see you. So it's that was sort of on my mind when I was walking through this place.
So I'm one of the fortunate people who's actually seen one just by chance, and I've actually seen it twice in the Western United States. Although I definitely put in my time out there. I did summer survey work for about 8 years, and I just spent countless hours hiking in the Western United States, and I didn't hike on trails and stuff. I was just doing like backcountry surveys. I was doing line transect surveys where you basically start at some fence post or something, and you walk just miles into the forest or into the wilderness, which is a good way to see some of these tough animals. You don't go where everybody else goes. It can be pretty tough walking sometimes when you some of these surveys you just walk straight up a mountain and then you go down the mountain and you go up the next mountain. It's like they're not designed for your convenience or ease. But you see some really wild places. I would get into these places and I would wonder, like, when was the last time another person was here? Maybe it was some Native American 200 years ago or something. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there was some guy on a motorbike a week ago. But places that had this feeling of being real wilderness. So, the first mountain lion I ever saw was in northern New Mexico, pretty remote national forest in northern New Mexico. And I was doing a bird survey. I was sort of sitting down and writing on my clipboard. When you do bird surveys, you're basically just hearing things and just writing down birds as fast as you can. Yep. It was in a pinyon juniper forest. It's kind of scrubby forest, sort of savanna. And I heard a twig crack behind me, like a classic, like something out of a book. And I turned around, and there was a mountain lion about 15 feet behind me, kind of crouched.
Really?
And I was sitting on the ground, and because of the slope, I was just looking right into its eyes. The amazing thing about this encounter was it didn't feel at all threatening to me. So this was sort of a 3/4 grown mountain lion. It wasn't a huge mountain lion. You could just tell it was a sort of a young mountain lion. It wasn't, maybe it wasn't real confident. I just didn't sense any threat from it. I just looked right in its eyes and I didn't sense any threat. I can't really explain. Typically we've talked about some of these encounters before on the podcast, right? When you encounter an animal like that, all these instincts just take over and just go into overdrive, and you just get this spike of adrenaline, and I just didn't get any of that. It was very weird because you write this story and you imagine you're going to be essentially maybe thrilled and terrified simultaneously. I was thrilled, but I just didn't feel threatened whatsoever.
You feel it, really?
I just looked at its eyes for a while, and then I moved a little bit, and it just turned around and scampered off.
Wow!
Didn't feel any threat, despite naturally you would have thought it was stalking me, and maybe it was, but I think I was too big, and
I think sometimes they do it out of curiosity. Yeah, just
I reckon.
What,
Yep, it was too small. It wasn't fully grown. It wasn't a confident hunter. So it was quite an encounter. Something I dreamed of seeing.
Although they can take prey bigger than themselves, can't they? I've seen some footage of some pretty impressive kills.
I think with this one, it just didn't have the experience. I'm sure maybe it was physically capable of that, but it just wasn't fully grown and fully experienced hunter. I don't know. Maybe I'm just imagining all this. Maybe it was. Maybe it would have killed me if I hadn't turned around.
Well, for those that don't know Ken, he's quite a big guy as well. You're pretty tall, so if you were a little scrawny dude, maybe it would have.
Yeah, it might make a difference. Like that anaconda story I told you a few weeks ago.
Yeah,
this
little
short guy walking around, and the anaconda finally decided, I could definitely eat him. So, yeah, that was the first encounter I had. The second encounter was actually in the Black Hills, but it was in the little Wyoming section of the Black Hills. So the Black Hills is this sort of isolated mountain range that's in, I guess it's in southwest South Dakota, and then there's a little bit of it in Wyoming, and it's sort of the furthest east extension of the Rocky Mountains biome. It has ponderosa pine forest and other coniferous forests, and it has most of the birds and other animals of the Rocky Mountains, although it's quite isolated by the plains. It's quite a cool place. You get a few eastern things show up there, and then some western things are lacking. But I was doing a bird survey. It was like a riparian forest survey. So on these, you can't really go in a perfectly straight line. You just follow the water course. So I was basically walking through this canyon in the western Black Hills. And it's not a huge canyon, but maybe 30, 40 meters. So I'm at the bottom of this fairly narrow kind of snaking canyon, and walking along and doing a survey every few hundred meters, stopping and doing a point count survey. And I'd done about half of the survey, and I was walking along, and suddenly around the bend of the canyon in front of me, I caught sight of the back of a big animal, and it was walking sort of the same speed as me in the same direction. So I actually sort of walked up behind it slowly. And my first take was that this was an elk. Because it was absolutely enormous, and just the breadth of the back, it just seemed like a huge animal. I thought, oh, that's an elk. And then I looked again, and I realized that's a mountain lion. Huge mountain lion.
Ooh.
And the nature of this encounter was just completely different than that first one I described. I felt immediately incredibly threatened, because I was in this narrow canyon. I'm basically walking along, and there's constantly some kind of cliff over my head. And then there's this huge mountain lion there that's, probably weighs similar to me. Big, confident adult. I'm in its territory. I don't even think it was aware of me. I just happened to come up behind it, which is, it's pretty incredible to have that sort of sighting where the animal's not even aware of you. But I did hundreds of these surveys, and I don't think I ever failed to complete one except on that day. And on that day, I decided I think it's ridiculous to try to do the rest of the survey, because this lion is walking the same direction I am. Like, am I going to walk another 1.5 miles in this sort of gauntlet through this canyon, knowing this mountain line's here? It just, it struck me as a ridiculous thing to do.
Sake of check off a couple of birds. Yeah.
Yeah, I just didn't finish the survey. Just called it a day. It's the only time I did that in 8 years of doing these surveys.
Wow.
So, yeah, it strikes me just how different these encounters were. This one, I didn't even look in its eyes, and I didn't see it very well. But just glimpsing this huge shape in front of me, and I think the nature of the terrain was somehow menacing as well. But yeah, it was a wonderful encounter as well. So I've only seen it twice. And then,
Well, that's twice more than most people. I tell you. Years ago, when I was birding in Chile, I went to a place called Chiloé Island, and I was birding along this road, and I saw a deer hanging, like a small deer, like hanging up in a tree, and I thought maybe someone had hit it with a car, and I was like, but why would anyone hang a dead deer in a tree? It just seems such a strange thing to do, and I never really thought much of it again. And a while later, I chatted to somebody, and they told me that that pumas they hang their prey. Often they'll make a kill and they'll hang it up. I don't know whether it kind of tenderizes it or what. I mean, often hunters will sort of hang stuff up. So yeah, it was quite interesting thing that I learnt. You know what? I think I was pretty close to seeing a puma once. I was in Peru once, up in over 3,000 meters in the mountains, maybe 3,500 meters, doing some birding, and I camped up there. And the ground used to frost over at night, and I was in my little tent, in my little cheap sleeping bag, freezing to death, laying there,
starring.
sort of, yeah, with a little candle, keeping warm on the candle, whatever. But I was just sort of laying there like 3 a.m. or 4 a.m, and I heard these footsteps outside the tent. These just very soft padded footsteps. It was obviously quite a large animal, and I was like, oh my god! And I'm kind of just thinking about where my stuff is, and because I usually keep my flashlight quite close to the thing in case I need to run out. And I got my flashlight, and I thought, I'm gonna try and jump out and shine the flashlight and see what's making this noise. And I did it. I sort of prepared myself, and then I sort of opened the thing and jumped out, and then I shone my light around. And it was pretty open. There was some forest, like, maybe 50 meters away or whatever. But if there was a big animal, there were cows in that area, but it took me about 2 seconds to jump out of this tent. And I got out there. There was no cows around. There was no big grazers or whatever. It was something it was a large animal that moved very quickly to get away from me. And I always firmly believed that this was a puma.
It sounds like
anyway.
It sounds like you're due to see one. You've had a few close brushes.
I've got this plan. I've got this plan of going to Torres del Paine. I'll just stay there until I see one.
That part of the world just looks amazing. That's one of the top places.
It'd be great just to go off hiking, and it looks amazing. And I think the way that Keith saw it was quite interesting, because he was using, he's pretty he's pretty good in the field, but I think there was some deer. There was maybe some white-tailed deer or whatever, and they were doing these alarm calls. And I think they had the sort of heads up pointing, like we see in Africa often when the antelopes they sense or they smell a lion or whatever. They'll sort of they'll stand it. They'll make a pose and sort of stand towards it, like looking up, very alert. And he said he saw these deer just doing this. It was almost like pointing to where this mountain lion should be. And I think then he had some sort of raptor. It might have been like a caracara, maybe soaring round and coming down and perching. And he was thinking, there's a kill there. I bet this is a puma with a kill. And he sort of maneuvered round, got some high ground, and looked down. And sure enough, he found this puma kill, and he saw this amazing. He had this amazing puma sighting. So, yeah, I'm definitely planning to. This is one of my trips that I was definitely keen to do.
That's South African bushcraft.
Yeah, bushcraft. Yeah, fully. Anyway, let's move on to the last one for today. We wanted to try and squeeze 3 animals in today. So next time it'll just be down to our top ones. So let's move to your number 2, which I believe is wolf.
Yeah, wolf. It's got to be the world's most widespread predator, because it's circumpolar and then
all across, yeah.
And then down, I'm not sure how far. They certainly got well down into Mexico.
Yeah, I think down into India and places like that. Into
definitely.
The deserts.
Yeah.
And the Chinese deserts and stuff. Yeah,
incredibly widespread sort of circumpolar animal. As I told you, I grew up obsessed with wolves and coyotes, and saw them in Yellowstone from time to time. But I guess I'd never heard wolves howling, which, it's got to be one of the great natural sounds, iconic kind of sound.
I hear that natural sound every day. These in my little housing estate just full of dogs howling. It's kind of drives me nuts.
So
But yeah,
one summer I was working in the Rockies in the West, but I had a bit of work in eastern South Dakota, and I realized I'm pretty close to the sort of the southern outskirts of the boreal forest in northern Minnesota. So I decided I would shoot up there for a couple days, get to see some different birds, some boreal birds and some more eastern birds, that sort of thing. Yeah, so I went up there for a few days, and I just got as deep into the wilderness as I could, back on little, forest, national forest roads, and it's that North Country. It's very boggy, and there's just endless beaver dams and swamps, and it wasn't real easy to walk around. I remember doing this big long hike, and I just spent half the hike like walking on like little mounds of dirt, and then a beaver dam, and then like it's just one big swamp. So different than the western mountains, which are quite dry, but I was enjoying it. But what was the reason this is my number 2 sighting was there was just this bizarre coincidence, which was I was lying in my tent one night way back in the North Woods, and I was actually reading Aldo Leopold's Sand County Almanac. Have you read that, Charlie?
I have no idea what that is.
Really? It's one of these sort of canonical books for American naturalists. He was a bit of a birder and a naturalist, and a great writer. You'd love it. If you grew up reading like Durrell, it's in that sort of ilk. Real nature lover. But so he has different chapters, and he had a whole chapter about wolves. And so I was literally lying there in my tent reading about wolves. From this sort of romantic perspective of Aldo Leopold, and I mean, I kid you not, I had just shut the book and turned off my light and to go to bed, and a whole pack of wolves started howling, not very far away from me, and it just it sent shivers down my spine. Like I just can't even explain. It was just weird. It was like I wasn't even thinking about the possibility of that happening, even though I kneu I was sort of theoretically in range for them. And the fact that they were just right there after I'd read this chapter on wolves, it was this staggering coincidence, unforgettable. And it's just a spine-tingling sound. Anytime you hear wolves howling like at night, it's one of these visceral primal sounds. When you think of our ancestors, human ancestors, like that's a sound that really inspired awe and fear through most of our history. Like a lion roaring is the same kind of thing. You just feel that like something is being pulled up from some deep place inside of you that you didn't even know you had. And I felt that way. It was incredibly thrilling. And after that, I've seen wolves a couple times. Last time I saw wolves was actually in India. You mentioned India, in northern India in Ladakh. Had a couple fantastic wolf sightings up there in the Himalayas, sort of 16,000 feet. I won't spoil my top lifetime sighting, but it's a bit related to that. Have you seen wolves?
Very special animal. No, I haven't. I haven't been in that many places where they occur. I mean, a lot of my nature traveling has been in the tropics, really, so I haven't done much high latitude stuff. I mean, the one time that I actually went specifically to look for them was in Italy. There's a national park called Abruzzo, and my sister lives in Italy, and it was only maybe 2 hours away from her house. So I thought, no, I'm going to go to this national park and drive around. There's brown bear there as well, so which people actually see occasionally. So yeah, we drove around a little bit, but yeah, no takers. But it's certainly not something that I feel I deserve to see just yet. But yeah, it is an iconic animal, and I would dearly love to see them one day. North America's got some pretty cool mammals, really.
It does.
If you think about it.
Yep. It's a good place for mammals. Something that fascinates me is that the coyotes seem to be evolving to get bigger and bigger in places that don't have wolves anymore. which
Right.
makes perfect sense ecologically.
Yeah.
Like, if there's tons and tons of deer around, as in the Northeast United States,
Yeah.
it pays to be big and then to be able to
Yep.
easily kill a deer. And so the coyotes are getting bigger, and they're
Uh-huh.
essentially, they're very, very closely related genetically to wolves.
Yeah.
I guess.
It's a little miniature version.
Yep. And so when there was wolves around, they were like the little scavenger brother to the big predator wolf, and they
Yeah.
follow the wolf packs and
Yeah.
scavenge their kills. But now there's no more wolves, and it's like nature abhors a vacuum. Apparently,
Yeah.
a woman was killed by coyotes I think it was in New Brunswick or something, and they were these
Really?
like big coyotes. It's tragic, but it's a fascinating phenomenon.
But yeah, no any kind of wild dog sighting is pretty special. It's a special group. I must say I do like them myself as well.
Love dogs. Jackals, I just never get tired of seeing jackals in Africa. It's fantastic. And there's some of these, like side-striped jackal. I've only seen that a handful of
Yeah.
times. Not a very common
Oh really?
animal. Yeah.
No. Very good. So that's some pretty exciting stories there, and we've built it up nicely. So our final episode of Top Lifetime Mammals is going to be my number one and Ken's number one. So that's going to be something to look forward to.
Yep, I guess we'll do that next week unless something
Yeah,
happens in the
we find
meantime.
anyone.
And
We are hoping to maybe get some guests in the next few weeks as well. We've got a list of people that we're planning to try and get on the show.
this episode's natural sound, I'll dig up a wolf somewhere. I'm sure I can find one online somewhere.
Yeah.
I think that'd be an appropriate one.
Definitely. Good catching up, and look forward to the next episode.
Likewise. Catch you then.